Good afternoon and welcome to SnapTech IT's last monthly webinar of 2023. My name is Ted Hulsey. I'm Chief Revenue Officer for SnapTech IT and your host for today's event. Thanks for joining in for the live session. This webinar will be recorded and circulated to all registrants. The topic for today is SnapTech's 2024 IT Outlook. I am joined today by Carl Bickmore, SnapTech's co-founder and CEO. Carl, welcome to the call.
Thanks, Ted. Can't believe it's the last one. Here we are, December.
Yep. We got our crystal balls out. We're ready to go, and we're going to give you guys our views on how the new year's looking and what it might mean for your business and the IT landscape. Let's look at the agenda real quick. So Carl's going to carry the ball on this one and give you his perspectives on some of the mega trends we're seeing and how they're going to impact our clients and prospective clients and businesses in general. We're going to narrow it down to 7 big predictions for 2024, and then we're going to talk about what you can do about them today. Whether you're an existing client, whether you're a prospective client, or you're just curious about what you and your business can do, we're going to try to give you practical advice on where you and your team can take your IT investments and business operations to deal with some of these mega trends. And then we invite you to ask questions as we go along. Questions, this makes it interactive, more interesting for you. So please try to stump Carl, try to stump us, give us your questions, and I'll be monitoring the Q&A log as we go along. One thing we like to do, we've got clients on the line here, but we also have companies that may not know us very well. We like to spend about 30 seconds just telling you a little bit about SnapTech IT. So we are a security-first managed service provider with operations in Atlanta, Phoenix, and San Francisco, California, and we can serve clients also nationwide. The way we work with our clients is we really go to market in 2 different ways. For organizations that don't have an IT department and are looking for a vendor to supply you with a fully managed IT experience, we deliver fully managed services to our clients. We also work with larger organizations that might have an IT manager, an IT director, or even a whole IT team where you're looking to outsource some portion of your IT stack to a third-party provider. So we call that co-managed IT. So those are the two ways we serve our clients. With that, let's get out of the infomercial part and get into the main event for today. So Carl, are you ready to go?
Yeah, thanks, Ron Popeil. No, just kidding. Hey, look, I saw the list of our existing clients that are joining us, and I'm really excited. I don't get out as often to everybody as much as I used to be able to when there was a few less of us around, and it's just really great to see some of the names there. So hi, it's good to see you. Maybe we'll be able to connect one-on-one soon as well. But it's really nice to know some of the folks that are joining us to hear some of our thoughts. And we look forward. I almost feel like some of you could tell me what's going to come up next year too, because you're some pretty smart people that I personally know out there. And then for those of you that we don't know as well, welcome. Hopefully we were able to provide some value for you as well, some thoughts that we're working on here. So.
Okay.
Yeah, so number 1 prediction on the line here. We're up for another cycle here, aren't we? Another presidential election.
Okay, and what's it going to mean for us, Carl?
So I think the big open question is are we heading into an economy that's going to have more of a soft landing? Are we looking at a recession year coming up? How does that fit? I think the GDP statistics are interesting, as we're saying that the prediction is, lukewarm at best, nothing to write home about next year. But how will that affect us? And how do the post-election uncertainties affect us? And I can tell you what I've seen as I've looked out there and been through this cycle a few times, just like many of you have. I always see uncertainty. Even if the economy is roaring, there's still people that will hold back and not make decisions because of the uncertainty that elections produce. And I feel like we're really getting into what now feels like the routine of extended uncertainty, and so what does that mean for us when people are a little more hesitant to, go ahead optimistically, when people are holding back a little bit? How does that affect our own businesses, our own employees' mindsets, and how our customers are going to act and interact? And so, which really brings on the table, what do you do with business uncertainty or lack of optimism? So I think a couple of things that I thought about when Ted and I were preparing for this webinar. I guess maybe one other thing to talk about is, not only do we have our client base as a frame of reference, but we also participate in users groups with other IT company owners. And so we hear about we had extensive meetings in November where there was a lot of conversation about that. And then also both my business partner, Sean, in the Atlanta area, and myself also participate in an entrepreneur organization where we hear from businesses of all types, other business owners. And so our scope of influence is wider than some, I suppose. Not to mention other really great networking groups we participate on, like I know one here in Phoenix that Ted and I participate in called Accelerant, that's given us a lot of point of view as well. And so what do you want to do? Well, when a customer is uncertain, it's a great time to emphasize the stability, the history, the performance with you and your existing clients. They want to know that you're here, you're not going to fall away during this process, and that you're there to make sure that they have a stable partner to rely on. And so that's how I'm thinking about it in our business. I think when you're also thinking about the strategy of your sectors, like some of our clients are in construction related fields, and we're going to talk about that in a minute too, but like what clients are they going to go after, or where does your market strategy go? I think it's a great time to be thinking about the evergreen categories, or the places that continue to do business even in economic downturn, or they remain stable during a time of uncertainty. So this can be, schools, government, larger enterprises, nonprofits. Just look for the verticals of your customer base are thriving, and think about how do you focus and grow your share into those evergreen categories. It's also, look, I think this is always a good business practice, but it's always good to spend time doing as Ted wrote it here, he kind of synthesized some of the things I was telling him. Rigorous cost containment and looking for outsourcing opportunities. Where are the places that you can shore up and reduce costs by doing maybe a little smarter, not harder, if you will. And so that's always a good option to look at, to think of how does that work. And there's lots of areas of your business that could apply. All right, and so maybe there's a new technology solution that can drive it, or maybe there's some type of outsourcing solution that can help you drive something at a lesser cost, or just in general having better discipline around budgeting and cost, expenses, and forecasting. Some of our customers we work with are very good at it, and some of them are more muscle and feel on how they approach that. And so the more you can be rigorous in that, the more you'll be prepared in case you need to weather some slower times. I know what we've seen is 2023 was like this, and I think 2023 will be even more so, where some customers are feeling great and optimistic and looking to move forward and ready to take on big projects, and other ones are holding back. I think we'll see even more of that hot and cold feeling next year. On to the second one. We see amongst our clients out there anecdotally, and we've put, Ted's done some great research here to put this behind, we see that construction sectors are bottoming or flat. I think particularly the commercial construction, commercial real estate is an issue. Ted, did you have any comments about it? It looked like you might have.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing, I think, Carl, some of the anecdotal things is we do a lot of business with folks in the construction industry. Of course, Phoenix is a historically Sun Belt region where this is a huge part of the economy, and we've been seeing things, bottom out. I think there's tremendous macro pressure with higher interest rates. Whether you're in commercial real estate or residential real estate, the whole dynamics of property and real estate have changed because of the interest rate environment. We're seeing various levels of stress in the commercial real estate sector because of the nature of remote work. Remote work is not only a struggle for everybody running companies, but lots of companies are changing their real estate footprints because they have fewer people coming into the office. They might be hiring over larger geographies. They might be just downsizing their real estate footprint because they are more leaning into remote work, and that's impacting leases, and it's impacting office capacity, and all of this is feeding back into the commercial real estate sector. and there's a lot of distress. There's a lot of distress. I mean, a lot of real estate holders are carrying a lot of debt, and some of those figures in terms of the amount of debt that is distressed um, are at 10-year highs. You know, it's kind of distress we haven't seen since the Great Recession at the end of the mortgage crisis in 2008, 2009. So all of this is coming together, and it feeds back into these struggles in real estate, also feeds back into what we're seeing in terms of the number of new housing starts and new commercial starts. So 2023, the residential housing starts nationwide took a significant dip. It's looking like that's going to continue. Some of the prognosticators are saying it's going to, like, by the end of 2024, they're going to kind of start going up again, but who knows? It's certainly a downtrend or a flat trend or a bottoming trend, whether we're talking residential real estate or commercial, residential construction or commercial construction. So those are
Yeah,
a couple thoughts, Carl.
yeah, an interesting thing when you move into the residential conversation too is, the starts are down from where they were, but an interesting fact is for several years now, even when it's been booming, the ability or the industry going after what would be called the starter home, the smaller, the 1,500 square foot things that are in the affordability space, that's basically a very lightly focused. And so there's an interesting problem in residential that the demand still remains very high, which will continue pricing high, and there is not anything being built in the space where the folks looking for first-time home buyers are going to be able to purchase, which has an interesting effect on the economy from the standpoint of where your employees that might be, earlier in their career, how are they going to work on housing and where are they going to want to live and what's going to be available, and how does that affect their ability to, say, come into the office or work from remote or just in general. That demand still remains very high, and there just doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in building the first-time home buyer option. And so
Yeah.
that's an interesting side effect that also very much affects the employment sector as well.
Yeah. Affordability is at an all-time low, not
Yep.
just because of constrained supply, but because of the cost of a mortgage today. With 7 to 8% interest rates for a first-time home buyer, that just dramatically changes the mortgage cost for that first-time home buyer. So it definitely feeds back into this conversation we're having around remote work. So
Hmm.
so what does this mean for? Whoops. What does this mean for? What does this mean for? Thinking about how to manage technology.
I was having a conversation with one of my buddies who owns and runs a mechanical, plumbing, electrical engineering organization, and he's one of the folks who's been sharing with me some of the, hey, we're seeing projects, and anecdotally, one projects that are getting canceled that they previously had signed. 2024 is looking like they really got to buckle up. But I think one of the things that I think is always good to think about when you're looking at a sector, or that's a sector you work in, or that's part of it, is anytime there's a downturn or an upturn, there's opportunity that can happen. And even during the Great Depression in the United States, it's something at least I learned about as a kid. I don't know everything about it economically, but I do know that there was still people that won, that had growing businesses during that time frame. And I think at some level in my own business, like, I feel like I meaningfully got SnapTech IT started. What was the version of it that I started here in Arizona? During 2008 and 2009, which is during another major economic downturn, the .NET bubble, if you will, and there is the opportunity in those timeframes. So what can you do to look for where people are going to need and find? What can you do to become more efficient, more strategic? How can you double down on technologies to drive efficiency of productivity? What can you modernize? As an example, like a lot of customers or opportunities we look at, they still have an older style server solution going. Have they thought about how they can become more lean and mean, have people kind of being functional and still highly secure, compliant, all the things you want, but having no servers involved in the office anymore, embracing more software application service, more mobility, more zero trust network architecture, more remote worker productivity. And here's a key insight too. It's like going to the cloud is not the same thing as going serverless. If you have servers in your office and then you just move to servers in the cloud that you're delivering like in an Azure or an AWS, you still basically have the same server problem and the server architecture. So when we say serverless, what we mean is you don't have server workloads anymore that you deal with like that. You simply have security controls from things like Microsoft Entra. You have cloud file systems that are secure and compliant that are delivered without a specific server, and you have your applications being driven by various SaaS vendors. And that particular setup allows for a lot of cost savings and extreme flexibility on productivity, kind of from anywhere in any scenario. And so those are just things to really consider, because if you're still stuck in that dynamic, you might have some costs weighing you down of server maintenance or backup fees that you're paying that you might be able to get on the other side of and actually have an even better work experience, being able to work from anywhere with full productivity. Once again, as we always say, also with a very high standard of cybersecurity defense and compliance. All those things can be true today, which that wasn't necessarily true 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. It was much more of a challenge. And there are still times when you can't make that switch, but you might be able to switch everything but the one thing that keeps you, like that one application, maybe still drive that from a local server, but you can move the rest out for the flexibility and cost savings. So these are all just things to think about. What can you do to modernize the digital transformation, so forth, so on. This is the one I think everybody's excited to think about and talk about. All of our minds got blown by ChatGPT this year, right?
That's right. That's right. But it's so AI, it's a double-edged sword. To talk to us about it.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of us think about like, okay, how can I get like, marketing copy written by AI, or how can I do research using AI, or how can I develop this new process? Or some of us might have even thought, how can I use it to help me write, code to do this or that task? There's a lot of things that you could think about using widely and publicly available AI products now. Like I love the AI products that we get in meeting systems that will listen and record meetings and give you to-dos and things that came up during the conversation. But with the AI comes the double-edged sword. There is risk and reward in that product. And so we can, for instance, use AI to help us be better at responding to cybersecurity things. We can do things that are faster and more accurate than what a human can do sometimes. But that is also led to the cyber criminals leveraging it very much the same way. They're amping their ability to attack, to customize, to make it unique, to make it harder to catch with AI systems as well. And so this is an interesting time where both we have the ability to leverage AI, but we also have to defend with AI or AI type, and we have to spread our defense wider than even before. So it's like, this is a crazy thing, because I know as business owners, this has been a ride for the last, say, 10, 15 years of, well, where does this technology security problem end? When do we get to stop doing this? And the answer is, I just don't know. It seems like it's always a cat and mouse game, that they're going to come up with something and we have to find new ways to defend it. So here's some of the modern approaches to defense that if you don't have these three approaches from a technology standpoint, that you really should consider. Like, do you have not just antivirus on your computers, but do you have managed detect and response antivirus, or MDR as it's called? In fact, a lot of times if you're getting cybersecurity insurance today, that's a big factor in the cost of that insurance, or even your ability to become insured, is if you're now using MDR instead of just traditional antivirus. Another really key element is a lot of the things that we've been using for many years to help with the security, things like VPN, are really now becoming a dated technology. And although they are more secure than just wide open opening your door to letting people remote into your network, which has proven to be incredibly irresponsible these days, VPN is now showing the signs of the age of the style of architecture, and zero trust is really the new thing, where not only are you controlled on your ability to enter into the environment, which is what VPN helps with, but then you're still further restricted as to where and what and how you can do things when you're running a zero trust scenario, which is proven to be more effective. The hackers find ways to get across your firewall line and get into your network. can you still stop them once they're inside? Only when you have zero trust approach can you do that. And then what I think the other big thing that I think a lot of business owners do not consider is there are workloads and data and ability to function your business happening out there in these SaaS applications. You go to the serverless environment, or you maybe set down an Exchange server and move out to Office 365 or the Google Workspace option. Now that is a front that has to be protected, monitored, needs detection, needs instant response. And we see far, far more successful attacks out there than, well, at least when the networks that we're managing where we have MDR and zero trust, that becomes the new front where we see the hackers trying to make their way in. 92% of successful attacks start with business email compromise. It's a SaaS application problem. And a lot of people do not have that monitored, and they don't even have the basics of security set up there. I would say, fortunately, if you're a client of ours, we have gotten after that. That's something that you had this in place. Many of you saw us add a new SaaS monitoring solution this year, and that was what it was all about, is how do we get this front covered? But these are the things that we have to do to now protect against what AI can do in the cybersecurity space, to rifle through your email, to try to find ways to your banking, to your employees, the direct deposit, to your accounting platforms, to getting access to your data. Maybe there's a ransomware event, but they don't have to do that to be causing you major problems. They could be doing all sorts of things. And so that's what we're looking to do. So the guidance is to make sure that you have this kind of trifecta in place to make sure that you can defend against the type of attacks that are happening today.
Okay, let's change gears and talk about work from home.
All right. Well, so look, it's interesting because I'm seeing like a split. The world is going in two different directions here, which is there are those that went to work from home during the COVID years, and then there are those that have said, no, you got to come back. And there is some getting into that camp. There's a faction there that's like, we're not going to do work from home, but it still seems that the majority of us are going to do work from home, at least in hybrid, where some time is like some days a week or some plan where work from home needs to be functional. And I think it's like, as we're noticing, it's affecting other trends like the commercial real estate space. This does seem like it's going to be here to stay. There are entire companies that now are dealing with what that cultural implication is in their business, but they've accepted that challenge versus the challenge of trying to hire people local or trying to hire people that want to come into the work, because that crowd is getting less and less. It is interesting because when we're out there hiring, we find folks that say, no, I want to come to an office. We're like, great, that's awesome. We actually feel like we get some of our best work when people are in the office. That being said, how do you deal with this reality of like, there are people that just you'll not be able to hire who you need sometimes if you can't offer this, or and then there's sometimes where it just makes sense in many ways for the business. And so what do we do with this work from home, and have we really got our strategy in place to make that happen?
Yeah, and there's I mean, just to jump in, I mean, there's no question that there's also kind of a generational dimension to this, that no question, there's a lot of younger workers who are just like, this is a table stake item. So at some generational level, the bell has been rung, and the technology is there today, and people have embraced it. And certain people, this is like a non-negotiable item for when they come in, when they're going to change jobs or look for a new role. And so you have to keep that in mind. It's still, despite everything in the economy, it's still challenging to find the right talent. And to kind of go back to one of the other topics we talked about earlier, a strategy to deal with the turbulence in the economy is to get more creative in your employment strategies. So for those organizations that are embracing remote work, you can find talent anywhere in the country. And that can mean you can get kind of more for your dollar in some cases, or that means you can more quickly find the person who is that perfect fit because they have that really niche skill set. I just saw, I won't mention the name of the client, but I just saw one of our clients just hired somebody, I think in Texas, and they've traditionally staffed most of their people in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it's a fairly senior resource. And so I just, I made a mental note, like, that client is embracing remote work, and I know through the grapevine, because of my awareness of the client, that they are doing that, and they're very clearly hiring talent in different places by embracing remote work. So I think the key thing we want to talk about here is to be intentional with your strategy, to not fight the data, what the data says. This is a reality. There's a huge part of the workforce that wants this either in a full-time basis or a hybrid basis, and then to make it part of your strategy and to address it. And so let's talk about what that might mean from a technology perspective, Carl.
Well, and I just have to say, it's like, look, I'm definitely like old school. What can I say? I'm one of those sticks in the mud that struggles with it, but I do see the reality of it, right? And we have to find a way to embrace it. Look, I think the key thing that we've learned is like, when we have folks working from home, this computer setup is intentional that we're showing, because this is kind of how people work in our office. They have 3 screens and they got a good comfortable experience, keeps them nice and productive. There's a lot that they get done on to make sure the computers are nice and new and functional, but also that our architecture is set up in a way that they can work the same kind of from anywhere. And when they work from home, we make sure that their setup is similar. It's kind of a big deal because it's like when you go home and you're working, say, just off of a little laptop screen, there's no doubt that you're less productive, especially if in your general work it makes sense to have a lot of screens and things like that. Not every worker is the same and not everybody needs the same, but if there's a setup at the office that makes sense, it might just also be worth considering. How are you enabling them to work from home if you're going to have them work from home? We even came up with a policy and standard that says, like, this is what you're required to do. And it's actually things about the setup that we're going to figure out how to provide to them, but also it's things about like requirements of like internet connection that they have to be willing to get, and other things around the non-distraction side of the things. It's a tough thing to think about, and it is kind of personal in its own way. But look, I think just the key thing is if you have the right architecture in place, if you're modernized in your cloud approach, and you can still do this securely, people can work from anywhere, it really does open up a world of possibility. I still think it's great to spend some time belly to belly, as we say, or in the same room. But there can be some meaningful advantages to work from home if it's done in a way that the worker could still be as productive, and not come home and have a less productive solution. And so things like hey, maybe the next purchase is laptops instead of desktops, with docking stations, and you get some extra monitors and things like that that make it really functional for people kind of wherever they go. That's certainly what I do. I have exactly the same monitor and setup and dock for my laptop, and so whether I'm at home or at the office, it actually feels identical to me as far as the computing system is concerned.
Right, and the implications on cybersecurity are also pretty massive, right, Carl? I mean, if we're in a world where there's really not a corporate perimeter, where you're no longer like worried about, oh, all my employees are sitting behind that corporate firewall, there's other implications of that. So we have to think about that there's not a perimeter anymore. It's more about managing identity. And so what does that mean in terms of kind of table stakes for the cybersecurity posture?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's really tough if you're not in control of the computers people are working from. I feel like that's a minimum. And so now you're not going to leverage traditional server systems like Active Directory on a server in an office. You might run it out of the Azure Active Directory, the Microsoft Entra product, as they've recently rebranded it, so that you can still control and have good, solid security for your systems, kind of wherever they are. And multi-factor authentication into things, zero trust architecture that really controls at a very fine-grained level where you can go and what you can do and what data you do and don't have access to, what you can copy, what you can move, all those kind of things. And then good logging and good detection, because you're going to not be able to easily distinguish between somebody that's a real worker or somebody that's logging in as a real worker that isn't a real worker, as an example. Those are some key elements to making that successful. And so look, if we embrace that work from home is here to stay, I guess the biggest thing is do it right. Security wise, setup wise, that's going to be your best bet. It may be frustrating to say, okay, now I have to buy an extra dock or an extra set of monitors and things like that. but it will keep your workers more productive when at home if they have a good setup, and also that you're doing it in a way that you're more protected. So
Right. And I think it's, and really if you look at it, the amount of investment you need to make to outfit people with laptops and have docking stations and the 3 monitor setup for home offices, it's a rounding error compared to the productivity benefits that you're going to get from your workforce. And think about employee happiness. I mean, every time you open up the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, any major business publication today, the time and time again, the conversation is around, are your employees happy? And employee satisfaction is a huge issue. There's lots of levers to pull, but we're technology guys, right? So we're going to kind of lean on okay, well, how can we invest in technology to make people super happy in their jobs and feeling empowered and supported by their employer because they have the right job tools to do their work day to day, right? So this is one piece of the puzzle, just something to think about. But the benefits you get from happy and productive employees is so much greater than the small investments you need to make to really empower people in a remote work scenario.
well, and I want to lean into that just a little bit here. So something I thought you're saying that reminded me of something that I do think about often. I can't remember exactly when I heard about this, but this concept, it might have been 5, 6, 7 years ago, but it's the concept of the technology experience for an employee from Sunday night into Monday morning. At home, we have Apple TVs, we hit a button, we can easily throw a phone up on the screen. We got all these ability to stream and do things. Our doorbell hits and we see it on our TV or some tablet nearby. Our thermostat's smart and doing all these amazing things. And we're having this amazing technology experience at home. And then we come into the office. Are we sitting down at something that's kind of like buckling us in, making it hard to work? It's clunky. There's all these extra steps. It's a slower experience. What are we doing to the end user psyche when their experience is so drastic? And at some level, it has to be different from work and home. They're not the same. They're not the same type of activities. But the point is, it's like, how are you addressing that feeling of the employee's experience? Technology definitely has something to say in that, if that makes sense. It's not all of it, but it is definitely something to say in that Sunday night to Monday morning experience on the technology piece. And so but you can't also do it without security and the things in place that need to happen. So have you done it in the way that feels smooth and simple and easy and faster, better experience? Those are the good questions to be asking when you're setting up the ability to work from home with really high level of productivity.
Okay, let's change gears and talk about what I called in this slide everyday AI, because really AI is becoming embedded in everything. So talk to us a little bit about what's happening with Microsoft and Copilot.
Yeah, so it's like so many things in the industry. Like, what's the next big thing? For many years, it's like, hey, it's the cloud. How are we going to get ready for the cloud? What are we going to do about this? And now, really, I think the next big technology wave that's going to change culture and do things is this everyday AI. And this is kind of a little bit different than what we're talking about in the previous conversation around AI and how it's being used for attacking and hacking and how it's being used for defense. This is now, how are you enabling every one of your employees to leverage it and be more effective and more efficient in AI? And have you thought of the security implications? Like, what data are you putting into AI that's now going to feed the information that AI might spit out to other places? Like, if you fed in like customer data into some like AI system, could somebody else query about the customer and get answers out of what you fed into it? There's a lot of implications both in use and ethics and also in the security side of it. But there's no doubt that this is here and it's coming, and it's something that I feel like as business owners we should be looking to embrace and finding the right ways to do it, and taking advantage of what this can offer. That being said, it shouldn't be done with total reckless abandon. It should have some governance around, some thoughts around it. The Microsoft Copilot is a very interesting project that's underway. Many organizations are putting projects around this. One of the things that's particularly interesting about that is that's essentially leveraging the similar kind of technologies that ChatGPT is doing, but now embedded in things like Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, where it can actually make suggestions live as you're doing things and watch what you're doing and bring stuff right to the table to making your end users faster, quicker, more capable, more, if you will. And so if any of you have spent any time on it, it's a very interesting, very Wild West area in some ways, and corporations are now beginning to put it into place and where you can put it. So I think, like I said, the Microsoft Copilot is one that we're very excited about because it's powerful, but it also is coming with more governance and security and functionality that meets the corporate need better, or the business need. So what's the guidance here? How do you leverage it? Well, first of all, one of the things, and this is just some good work that Ted and we talked about this, with good work that Ted did to put this together. I think it's a really great insight that you can't just say, okay, everybody now use it, because they're like, okay, so what do I do? Or how do I start? Where do I go? People need some guidance. And so taking a few people that are either more prone or more savvy or already kind of down that journey a little bit, and enabling them as champions to teach and show and guide, give other people ideas, learning how to do this new exercise that we haven't done before, and like, hey, I should ask this question there, so building out champions, some internal power users, is a really great strategy on how to start the process, and then consider how you can explore it at a greater level. Embrace experimentation, early adopter spirit, trial and error, learning how to give AI prompts. There's so much material being generated out there teaching people how to do this. Are you plugged into those podcasts? Are you looking at those articles? Are you getting that content in your feed? Maybe there's some things you can do to bring that in to what you're doing. And then encourage the broad-based adoption. This is something we think 2024 is going to be the year of mass adoption of AI. It's already begun, and it's only going to grow. It has all sorts of new implications, but it also has a very high reward option with it as well.
Yeah, and I think some of the guidance you were giving is really to challenge the business leaders who have joined us on this call to, you really got to kind of almost emotionally lead your team through all of this change. It's daunting, right? I think at some level it can get exhausting sometimes, the amount of technological advancement and innovation that's happening around us and the need to always change. But I like to tell a funny story. So we actually use a product called Gong, which for all of our sales folks, it records all of their calls, it transcribes all of their calls, it organizes your action items coming out of the meeting. So Gong is a company that's been doing this for a couple of years, well ahead of Microsoft, and Microsoft is kind of catching up to these small, scrappier, innovative software companies. And we had a member of our team who thought recording all of their calls was maybe a little bit too intrusive. But it's funny, it took about 60 days for this sales colleague of mine to all of a sudden discover that Gong is her best friend, and that Gong is now capturing her action items. When her VCIO colleague can't make a call, she's able to send a transcription and recording of the call to her colleague so that they can stay on the same page about things. So I just want to challenge you to challenge your people to really lean into this technology. Hopefully stay close to us, because we're going to keep banging this drum and probably doing interesting, more deep dive content on a lot of these AI topics. But some of this technology can really transform how you operate your business, how you run your sales team, how you do customer support, how you support your business partnerships. And I just think this one was a kind of a funny one. Within 60 days, we went from having a doubter to somebody who's their biggest fan of this new technology that really changes how they work.
It's really like a personal assistant, and taking care of things that you used to have to split your interest and multitask to do, right? So, yeah, as a small example, have you considered an AI option for attending your Zoom or Teams meetings, as an example? That's what Gong is. It's one of those many tools. I hear about Otter as well a lot. There's several of them now. Which would be right for you, what hits the right security and compliance protocol for you, what meets the need, and cost wise and whatnot. But those are some very helpful tools that make those meetings so much more productive. And how many of us live in this? I know I do live in this world of back to back calls, and almost all of them have some element of either a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams thing. And how do I keep up? How do I keep my notes going? So it's just it's an interesting, probably one of the better use cases already available and functioning at a pretty good level for AI is that kind of technology. So this is good way to point that out. I think there's many ways it can be used.
Okay, let's change gears and just double click a little bit on the kind of most dangerous and most consistent and persistent things that are happening to us from a cybersecurity or cyber attack perspective, which is social engineering.
Yeah, I feel like, just really quick, just to kind of take people through the scope of how this is developing. So, as business owners, or just managers or people out there trying to help our folks do a good job, we have to remember how this has gone, because I feel like so often people have kind of notions that aren't quite as up to date as the reality of today when it comes to some of these cybersecurity things. And so the problem that we're faced with is that many people think, hey, I've got an antivirus, I got firewall, I've got backup, and I got everything I need. Until the day comes that they realize, oh, somebody got into the system and blew right past our antivirus because we didn't use a virus in our hack. And then they get right in and start doing stuff. They're logged in as one of your users who doesn't even know it. And now they're actually killing your backup before they do other stuff, so your backup's not available. And then what are you going to do, to resolve this issue? How, do you even know that they're there? Is a really good question. But there's no doubt that the most effective by a mile is your own end user's behavior. The things that they're willing to do in technology, sending a password over email, accepting a meeting invite that they should, opening a text doc or opening an attachment in an email and then enabling macros, which lets code run on your system. There's just so many things that your end users are still not savvy enough to avoid or to stop from happening. And frankly, your end users can defeat some of the best security that can be put in place by their own behavior. And so social engineering continues to be the number one way, and it's primarily done initially through email. It's the number one front that we're dealing with. And so even just simple things can be done to stop some of this stuff, like putting multi-factor authentication in place. But there's more that needs to happen today. And so, this is a great graphic. This is a classic graphic I feel like I've seen this for years. These are all the things we could do in security. We call this defense in depth. And that's a really great way of thinking of it. It's not enough to put one thing in place and say we've now solved the problem of social engineering. There's end user training that needs to happen, and it needs to happen pretty much on a regular basis. There needs to be simulation tests sent to them to see how they respond, and then get additional training when they respond poorly from a security. Not browbeating or shaming, but help them learn, help them grow. There's endpoint security that needs to have managed detect and response. There needs to be monitoring and threat detection. There needs to be permissions and restrictions. It really requires a lot of things to be put in place to slow the attackers down from keeping them out of your most important mission critical assets, your data, your systems, your ability to function. And so just know that the tip of the spear is still very much social engineering. That's absolutely where it's going. The hackers aren't, I mean, there are viruses out there, they do send them, but they're sent by bots, they're sent by AI systems. The people actually actively hacking you are almost always calling up and saying they're from help desk, or they're a coworker asking for a password to thing, or somebody that's faking to be your vendor asking for a deposit change, or it's the social engineering is by far the most effective thing still. So we just have to keep on our toes and make sure that your team's getting regular, consistent training and education about it, and you're doing the things to keep them on their toes, so that they keep a defensive attitude.
So, Carl, before we tackle the very last mega trend and what we feel like it means, I want to remind everybody, if you've got questions, we're going to have a couple minutes here to do a formal Q&A. So what's on your mind? What do you feel like your team is struggling with? Where do you feel like maybe there needs to be more innovation or more attention from us? So let's try to get some of those questions on the table. But Carl, talk to us about the SaaS revolution, where we're going. When we talk about serverless,
Yeah,
what do we mean by that?
I mean, I already alluded to this at some level before. I think that, for many years, many businesses would operate in the classic client-server model of architecture. It's a very proven, very stable, very functioning model. For many years now, vendors have been hard at work at putting their applications up to be software application as a service or SaaS application, or let's call it cloud-based, right? You might log into a web page to use that application, but now it does everything it needs to do from that, rather than needing to install an application on your client, have some server with a database running it that needs to be backed up and needs to be all these other things to manage it, right? And the costs involved in the hardware, so forth, so on. But then for a long time, people said, okay, well, this server hardware is expensive, so let's take those servers and virtualize them and put them up into the cloud. But you still have servers, you still have the management, you still have the security thing, and now you've actually added to the complexity of the network. Maybe there was some additional flexibility, but in many ways, that didn't make as much sense to me as where we've started heading in the last several years and where we see the trend going. I mean, almost all of our new client interactions, unless they've got some application that keeps them grounded where they need to stay with the server, we're going to recommend that we don't have servers in their environment at all. Cloud-based file systems that are secure, like well, we'll get to, we have a slide for, yeah, here it is. So like, this is the main recipe we like to use that we think is a really smart recipe for lots of reasons. We're going to do cloud-based file system with Ignite. The Office 365 product is good, but not great. When we find it on the security and the compliance front, it could be better on the data side of it. But even more so, the bigger thing is users get confused and it's hard to control your data, hard to make sure it's backed up. And so it really becomes a part where it's an efficiency problem. And there are some real data size limitations with the product. So I think in some scenarios, in some parts, it can be great, but we think third party on the cloud file system is better. The best one we see is the Ignite product. We don't get paid extra to say that. That's just the one that we see the greatest amount of success with, the happiest endpoint users with, if that makes sense. And also, when you don't have a server anymore, you need to figure out how to still keep your system secure, because for many of you, that's another major function that your server is doing, is every time you go up to the computer to log in, that username and password is check that computer is controlled and checked in at the server to say, is this a username and password that works, and what do I get access to in the network? What drives do I get? What applications can I load? And when you remove the server from the center, you need to replace that, not just go no control. That would be much worse from the security standpoint. So good news is Microsoft has seen this coming. They're definitely pushing us towards this cloud-based piece. When they moved their Exchange stuff into Office 365, they started this process. And now what you can do with the Microsoft Azure Active Directory, or called Microsoft Entra, recently rebranded, you can control the login and the security of your systems from the cloud as well. In fact, if you're already using Office 365, this is actually a fairly minor thing to introduce, because it's already in use in your Office 365, and you could use it to also control all of your workstations, Mac or PC, and the access. And it actually has mobile device management control, can control your access to data and these things on mobile devices as well. So that's a big formula. And so then the rest of your network would be driven by SaaS applications for your accounting package, or maybe your EHR for managing health records, or maybe your main ERP program, or your main quoting system, selling system. All these systems go SaaS, find a way to drive them from the cloud.
Right. And just to kind of bring it full circle, we talked at the beginning about, some of the macro trends on the economy, going serverless, embracing SaaS solutions, embracing SaaS solutions deployed correctly with the right levels of security. All of this is about making you more agile and allowing you to deal with some of this economic uncertainty, because these are more cost-effective ways in deploying this technology to your workforce. And the same goes for all of the things we talked about with embracing remote work. If you're going to embrace remote work, if you're going to be, have your headquarters in Scottsdale and your new VP in Houston, Texas, well, you better be using Azure AD or Microsoft Entra as your way to manage identity, because now you have employees and executives spread all over the United States, and you need the same level of thoroughness and security that you traditionally had in your traditional office, but now you have a workforce that's all over the country. You have to manage that identity. So hopefully you're seeing how all these trends kind of weave together. And hopefully this has been a thought-provoking conversation today, and we've given you some new insights into where you can manage and take your technology stack in the new year. Just to kind of round things out, again, want to invite you. What questions do you have? I would say that if just a quick comment about how we engage. If you're looking for a managed service provider or you're considering using a managed service provider, we always, when we embrace a new client, we always do a risk assessment at the beginning of our engagements. And then we follow a methodical process to evolve and advance the technology situation for our clients over time. For the existing clients, if there was something that, prompted caught your ear today or caught your eye, and you want to double click on it or dig deeper on it, that's your opportunity when you're in your QBR with your account manager and VCIO to double click on that topic and have a deeper dialogue about any of the things we discussed today. Because these are, all of the things we talked about today, we took from our day-to-day interactions with our clients, supported with the data and trends we're seeing out there in the market. So,
Yeah.
Carl, any additional thoughts on that?
Thing to recognize, it's like many of our existing customers are actually already on this system, and now maybe you're seeing a little bit about why we've been making those recommendations. And then some of you are ready to go, but you're waiting for the server cycle to reach its end of use, on depreciation and the value put into it. And so probably on the next cycle you're going to go there. To me, it's not a matter of if you should embrace it, it's when is it. But this is definitely the number one trend. We flipped the switch from is it a server, is it serverless, is it cloud, is it not? It's now by default serverless unless there's a reason not to. And I think that's 2024 will be hallmarked by that's the primary go-to, and it's even been that way in 2023 as well. But many people don't realize and they don't understand the difference. So that's why we wanted to explain that. But we think that's the big trend of next year. We'll see lots of companies making that switch.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any additional questions, so it looks like we're going to get everybody out of here a few minutes early. So thank you for joining us for the last webinar of the year. We really appreciate you joining us live. Copies of this presentation will be emailed to everybody who registered. We also always take all of our webinars and put them up on our YouTube channel. So if you heard something today and you want to revisit a portion of the conversation, always check out our YouTube channel. If you want to share something with a colleague or share something with your executive team, or you want somebody to tune in to a portion of today's conversation, go to the YouTube channel, grab the video, and share that particular snippet with a colleague or peer who you want us to maybe tune in on some of this stuff. But before we go, I just want to make a plug for our upcoming webinar in January. We'll be doing, we're going to, January, February, we're going to take things in a slightly different direction where we're going to be talking less about technology and more about maybe kind of the operating system that you use to run your business, and we're going to be talking about EOS. Carl, maybe inspire people to tune into us when we do the session in January.
Well, look, it's a system that we embraced and began operating our company on. It's a system management. So you can read the book and learn about it. We actually had a formal implementer come and help us back in 2016. And we've learned a lot about it. There's a lot of our customers that we've already had this conversation with, but I feel like there's a lot of customers or business owners that haven't been introduced to this kind of concepts and some of the wisdom that comes with the system. So whether you use that in a system or embrace it or not, there's a lot of really great thoughts that I think apply universally. Or maybe it's worth even exploring whether you're going to implement EOS. We're not an EOS implementation company, but we've received a ton of benefit from it, and we've seen a lot of our clients receive a ton of benefit from it. So I think anybody that's a business owner or a manager that feels like you could do a better job of keeping track of things, making sure things get driven home, having better goals, having more productive employees, making the right choices, less oversight, less chaos in the business. I think there's a lot to be said for the meeting methodology, the strategy methodology, the people management methodology. There's just so much wisdom in that system. We're excited to introduce people to it and maybe have a conversation about it. We've been operating on it very adherently since 2016. And so we've got some experience under our belt with it. We'd be happy to share. And so hopefully there's some value there. I find that when I'm talking to our customers, pretty universally, they're pretty interested. So we thought,
yeah, I mean, And just to give a little bit of inspiration here, like we literally decided to do this webinar because we have a client who came into a Teams call, and she was holding the book Traction under her arm, and we're like, oh, and and we saw that she was reading the book Traction, and it prompted a conversation. He said, oh yeah, we're thinking about implementing EOS, and we're like, oh, awesome, let's have a conversation about that. So we have lots of clients who have already embraced EOS, but we have many more probably that are struggling with the same things that we've struggled with as a company in earlier periods with, as Carl said, properly organizing the business and having the right vision and focus and rhythm in how you run the business. And so we're bringing an EOS expert, a third-party expert who's an implementer to be our guest speaker for both sessions, but we'll also be talking about our own firsthand experience with implementing EOS as well. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us for our last webinar of the year. Thank you so much. Tune in to the on-demand version if you heard something that you want to revisit. Thank you so much to our clients and anyone looking to engage with us. Thanks for joining us, and have a happy holidays and a very successful new year. Take care.
Thank you.